Yo, welcome to day 67 of reading every single day for 30 minutes for the rest of my life. Today we got the Fellowship of the Ring. I am on page... That's a good question. I am on page... I'm pretty sure... Ring goes south, yeah, past that. 292. 292 is where I'm at, yep. Alright. I'm going to get 30 minutes. Started right now. I got some tea going. It's day 67. Day 67. 30 minutes starting now. That's a stopwatch. 30 minutes starting now. Let's go. Someone's outside. It was a cold gray day near the end of December. The east wind was streaming through the bare branches of the trees and searching in the dark places on the hills. Ragged clouds were hurrying overhead dark and low. As the cheerless shadows of the early evening began to fall, company maid began to set out. They were to start at dusk, for Elrond counseling them to journey under cover of night as often as they could, until they were far from Rivendell. You should fear the many eyes of the servants of Sauron, he said. I do not doubt that news of the discomfiture of the riders has already reached him, and he will be filled with wrath. Shit, I gotta go get it. Hold on. Okay, I'm just coming back with tea. I'm back with tea now. Alrighty, I got my tea. I'm gonna keep reading. You should fear the many of eyes of the servants of Sauron, he said. I do not doubt that news of the discomfiture of the riders has already reached him, and he will be filled with wrath. Soon now his spies on foot and wing will be abroad in the northern lands. Even of the sky above you must beware as you go on your way. The company took little gear of war, for their hope was in secrecy, not in battle. Aragorn had Arundel, but no other weapon, and he went forth clad only in rusty green and brown. As a ranger for the wilderness, Boromir had a long sword, in fashion like Anduril, but of less lineage, and he bore it as also a shield, and he wore his war horn. Loud and clear it sounds in the valley of the hills, he said, and then let all the foes of Gondor flee. Putting it in his lips, he blew a blast, and the echoes leaped from rock to rock, and all that heard that voice as Rivendell sprang to their feet. Slow should you be in the wind that horn again, Boromir said. Elrond, until you stand once more on the borders of your land, and dire need is on you. Maybe, said Boromir, but always I have let my horn cry at the setting forth, and though thereafter we may walk in the shadows, I will not go forth as a thief in the night. Gimli, the dwarf alone, was... I'm going to take a bite of my ramen. Hold on. All right. Legolas had a bow and a quiver, and at his belt a long white knife. The younger hobbits wore the swords that they had taken from the barrow, but Frodo took only Sting and his mail coat. As Bilbo wished, remained hidden. Gandalf bore his staff, but as girt at his side was the elven sword, Glamdring, the mate of Octrys that lay now upon the breast of Thorin under the lonely mountain. All were well furnished by Elrond with thick, warm clothes, and they had jackets and cloaks lined with fur. Spare foods and clothes and blankets and other needs were laid in on a pony, none other than the poor beast that they had brought from Bree. The stay in Rivendell had worked a great wonder of change on him, and he was glossy and seemed to have the vigor of youth. It was Sam who had insisted on choosing him, clearing that. Where was I? It was Sam that had insisted on choosing him, declaring that Bill, as he called him, would pine if he did not come. That animal can nearly talk, he said, and would talk if he stayed here much longer. If he gave me a look as plain as Mr. Pippin could speak it, if you don't let me go with you, Sam, I'll follow on my own. So Bill was going on the beast of burden, yet he was the only member of the company that did not seem depressed. Their farewells had been said in the great hall by the fire, and they were only waiting now for Gandalf, who had not yet come out of the house. A gleam of firelight came from the open doors, and soft lights were glowing in many windows. Bilbo, huddled in a cloak, stood silent on the doorstep beside Frodo. Aragorn sat with his head bowed to his knees. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. The others could be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. Sam was standing by the pony, sucking his teeth and staring moodily into the gloom where the river roared stonily below. His desire for adventure was at its lowest ebb. Bill, my lad, he said, you oughtn't to have took up with us. Bill, my lad, he said, you oughtn't to have took up with us. You could have stayed here and ate the best hay till the new grass comes. Bill wished his tail and said nothing. Sam eased the pack on his shoulders and went over anxiously in his mind all the things that he had stowed in it. If he had forgotten anything, his chief treasure, his cooking gear, and the little box of salt that he had always carried and refilled when he could, a good supply of pipeweed, but not near enough, I'll warrant, flint and tinder, woolen hose, linen, various small belongings of his master's that Frodo had forgotten and Sam had stowed to bring them out in the triumph when they had called for. He went through them all. Rope, he muttered, no rope. And only last night you said to yourself, Sam, what about a bit of rope? You'll want it if you haven't got it. Well, I'll want it. I can't get it now. At that moment, Elrond came out with Gandalf, and he called the company to him. This is my last word, he said in a low voice. The ring-bearer set out of the quest of Mount Doom. On him alone is any charge laid. Neither to cast away the ring, nor to deliver it to a servant of the enemy, nor indeed to let any handle it, save members of the company and the council, and only then in gravest need. The others go with them as free companions, to help him on his way. You may tarry or come back, or turn aside into other paths as chance allows. The further you go, the less easy will it be to withdraw. Yet no oath or bound is laid on you to go further than you will, for you do not know yet the strength of your hearts, and you cannot foresee what each may meet upon the road. Faithless is he that says farewell when the road darkens, said Gimli. Maybe, said Elrond, but let him not vow to walk in the dark, who has not seen the nightfall. Yet sworn word may strengthen and quaken heart, said Gimli, or break it, said Elrond. Look not too far ahead, but now go with good hearts. Farewell, and may the blessing of elves and men and all free folk go with you. May the stars shine upon your faces. Good luck, cried Bilbo, stuttering with the cold. I don't suppose you will be able to keep a diary. Frodo, my lad, but I shall expect a full account when you get back. And don't be too long. Farewell. Many others of Elrond's household stood on the shadows and watched them go, bidding them farewell with soft voices. There was no laughter, no song or music. At last they turned away and faded silently into the dusk. They crossed the bridge and wound slowly up the long steep paths that led up the cloven vale of Rivendell. And they came at length to the high moor where the wind hissed through the heather, and with one glance at the last homely house twinkling below them as they strode away far into the night. At the ford of Brunnen they left the road and turning southwards went on by north paths among the folded land. Their purpose was to hold this course of west of the mountains for many miles and days. The country was much rougher and much more barren than the green vale of the great river in Winderland on the other side of the range, and their going would be slow, and they hoped in this way to escape the notice of unfriendly eyes. The spies of Sauron had hitherto seldom been seen in this empty country, and the paths were little known except to the people of Rivendell. Gandalf walked in front, and with him went Aragorn, and knew this land even in the dark. The others were in file behind, and Legolas, whose eyes were keen, was rearguard. The first part of their journey was hard and dreary, and Frodo remembered little of it. Their journey was hard, and dreary, and Frodo remembered little of it, save the wind. For many sunless days an icy blast came from the mountains on the east, and no Gormant seemed able to keep out its searching fingers. Though the company was well clad, they seldom felt warm, either moving or at rest. They slept uneasily during the middle of the day in some hollow of the land, or hidden under the tangled thorn bush that grew in thickets in many places. In the late afternoon they were roused by the watch, and took their chief meal, cold and cheerless as a rule, for they could seldom risk for lighting of a fire. In the evening they went on again, always as nearly southward as they could find a way. At first it seemed to the hobbits that although they walked and stumbled until they were weary, they were creeping forward like snails and getting nowhere. Each day the land looked much the same as it had the day before, yet steadily the mountains were drawing nearer. South of Rivendell they rose even higher and bent westwards, and about the feet of the main range there were stumbled an ever wider land of bleak hills and deep valleys filled with turbulent waters. Paths were few and winding, and led them often only to the edge of some sheer fall, or down into treacherous swamps. They had been a fortnight on the way when the weather changed. The wind suddenly fell and then veered round to the south. The swift-blowing clouds lifted and melted away, and the sun came out, pale and bright. There came a cold, clear dawn at the end of a long stumbling night march. The travelers reached a low ridge crowned with ancient holly trees whose gray-green trunks seemed to have been built on the very stone of the hills. Their dark leaves shone, their berries glowing red in the light of the rising sun. Away in the south, Frodo could see the dim shapes of lofty mountains that seemed now to stand across the path of the company was taking. At the left of his high range rose three peaks. The tallest and the nearest stood up like a tooth tipped with snow. Its great bare northern precipice was still largely in the shadow, but where the sunlight slanted upon it, it glowed red. Gandalf stood at Frodo's side and looked out under his hand. "We have done well," he said. "We have reached the borders of the country that men call Hollin. Many elves lived here in happier days, when Eregion was its name. 45 leagues as the crow flies we have come, many long miles further when our feet have walked. The land and the weather will be milder now, but perhaps all the more dangerous." "Dangerous or not, a real sunrise is mighty welcome," said Frodo, throwing back his hood and letting the morning night fall on his face. "But the mountains are ahead of us," said Pippin. We must have turned eastwards in the night." "No," said Gandalf, "but you see further ahead in the clear light. Beyond those peaks the range bends round southwest. There are many maps in Elrond's house, but I suppose you never thought to look at them?" "Yes, I did, sometimes," said Pippin, "but I don't remember them. Frodo had a better head for that sort of thing." "I need no map," said Gimli, who had come up from Legolas and was gazing out before him with a strange light in his deep eyes. "There is the land where fathers worked of old, and we have wrought the image of those mountains into many words of metal, of stone, and into many songs and tales. They stand tall in our dreams, Berez, Zirac, Sharthor. Only once before I have seen them afar in waking life, but I only know them in their names. For under them lies Khazad-dûm, the Durodelf, and it is now called the Black Pit. Morir, the Elvish tongue. Yonder stands Berzanbar and Redhorn, cool Cardares, and beyond him are Silvertine and Cloudyhead. Celebdil the White, and Faunadhol the Grey, and that we call Zergzigil and Bunda Shathar. There are the misty mountains divide, and between them arms are lie in the deep shadows valley which we cannot forget. Asanal Basar and the Drimmel Day, which the elves call Nerduran. It is for the Demiral Dale that we are making, said Gandalf. If we climb the pass that is called the Redhorn Gate, under the far side of Clandehagras, we will come down by the Darum Stair into the deep vale of the dwarves. There lies the Miramir, and the river Silver Road rises in its icy springs. Dark is the water of Khalid Zerham, said Gimli, and are cold of the springs of Kibble Nala. My heart trembles at the thought that I may see them soon. May you have joy of the sight, my good dwarf, said Gandalf. Hi, Clemmy. But whatever you may do, we at least cannot stay in that valley. But we must go down to the Silver Lode, into the secret woods, and so the great river, and then he paused. Yes, and where then? Asked Merry. To the end of the journey, in the end, said Gandalf. We cannot look too far ahead. Let us be glad that the first stage is safely over. I think we will rest here, not only today, but tonight as well. There is a wholesome air about Holland. Much evil must befall a country before it wholly forgets the elves. If once they dwelt there, that is true, said Legolas, but the elves of this land were of a race strange of us and the sylvan folk, and the trees and the grass do not now remember them. Only I fear the stones lament them. Deep they delved us, fair they wrought us, high they builded us, but they are gone. They are gone. They sought the heavens long ago. That morning they lifted up a fire hollow, shredded by great bushes of holly, and their supper breakfast was merrier than it had been since they had set out. They did not hurry to bed afterwards, for they expected to have all the night to sleep in, and they did not mean to go on again until the evening of the day. Only Aragorn was silent and restless. After a while he left the company and wandered on the ridge. There he stood in the shadow of the tree, looking out southwards and westwards, and his head posed as he was listening. Then he turned to the brink of the dell and looked down at the others laughing and talking. What is the matter, Strider? Merry called up. What are you looking for? Do you miss the east wind? No, indeed, he answered, but I miss something. I have been in the country of Holland in many seasons. No folk dwell here, but many other creatures live here at all times, especially birds. Yet now all things but you are silent. I can feel it. There is no sound for miles about us, and your voices seem to make the ground echo. I do not understand it. Gandalf looked up with sudden interest. But what do you guess is the reason? He asked. Is there more in it than surprise at seeing four hobbits? Not to mention the rest of us, where people are seldom seen or heard. I hope that is, answered Aragorn, but I have a sense of fullness and a fear, and I have never been here before. Then we must be careful, said Gandalf. If you bring a ranger with you, it is well to pay attention to him, especially if the ranger is Aragorn. We must stop talking aloud, rest quietly, and set the watch. It was Sam's turn that day to take the first watch, but Aragorn joined him. The others fell asleep. Then the silence grew until even Sam felt it. The breathing of the sleepers could be plainly heard. The swish of the pony's tail and the occasional movements of his feet became loud noises. Sam could hear his own joints creaking if he stirred. Dead silence was round him, and over all hung a clear blue sky as the sun rode from the east. Away in the south, a dark patch appeared and grew and drove north like flying smoke in the wind. What's that, Strider? It don't look like a cloud, said Sam in a whisper to Aragorn. He made no answer. He was gazing intently at the sky, but before long Sam could see for himself what was approaching. Flocks of birds, flying at great speed, were wheeling and circling and traversing all the land as if they were searching for something, and they were steadily drawing nearer. Lie flat and still, hissed Aragorn. Lie flat and still, hissed Aragorn. Lie flat and still, hissed Aragorn, pulling Sam down in the shade of a holly bush, for a whole regime of birds had broken away suddenly from the main host and came flying low, straight towards the ridge. Sam thought they were a kind of crow of a large size. As they passed overhead, in so dense a throng that their shadow followed them darkly over the ground below. One harsh croak was heard, not until they had dwindled into the distance, north and west, and the sky was clear again would Aragorn rise. Then he sprang up and went and awakened Gandalf. Regiments of black crows are flying flying over all the land between the mountains of the Grey Flood, he said, and they have passed over Holland. They are not natives here. They are Creban, out of Forglond and Dunland. I do not know what they are about. Possibly there is something trouble away south from which they are fleeing. But I think they are spying out the land. I have also glimpsed many hawks flying up in the sky. I think we ought to move again this evening. Holland is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched. Damn. They're being watched now. Fuck. I gotta stretch out. Oh shit. And in that case, so is the Redhorn Gate, said Gandalf, and how can we get over without being seen? I cannot imagine. But we will think that when we must, as far as moving as it is dark, I am afraid that you are right. Luckily our fire made little smoke and had burned low before the Creban came, said Aragorn. It must be put out and not lit again. Well, if that isn't a plague and nuance, said Pippin, the news, no fire, and a move again by night, had been broken to him as soon as he woke in the late afternoon. All because of a patch of crows. I had looked forward to a real good meal tonight, something hot. Well, you can go on looking forward, said Gandalf. There may be many expected feasts ahead for you. For myself, I should like a pipe to smoke in comfort and warmer feet. However, we are certain of one thing at any rate. It will get warmer as we get south. Too warm, I shouldn't wonder, muttered Sam to Frodo. But I'm beginning to think it's time we have sight of the Fiery Mountain, and saw the end of the road, so to speak. I thought at first that this here Redhorn, or whatever it is, might be it, till Gimli spoke his piece, a fair jaw-cracker dwarf language must be. Maps conveyed nothing to Sam's mind, and all distances in this strange land seemed so vast that he was quite out of his reckoning. All that day the company remained in hiding. The dark birds passed over now and again, but as the restorer's sun grew red, they disappeared southwards. At dusk the company set out, and turning now half at least, they stirred their course towards Caradhras, which far now half east, they stirred their course towards Garados, which far away still glowed faintly red in the last light of the vanished sun. One by one white stars sprang as forth the sky faded. Guided by Aragorn, they struck a good path. It looked to Frodo like the remains of ancient road that one once been broad and well planned from Holland to the mountain pass. The moon, now at the full, rose over the mountains and cast a pale light in which the shadows of the stone were black. Many of them looked to be worked by hands, though now they lay tumbled and ruinous in a bleak, barren land. It was the cold, chill hour before the first stir of dawn, and the moon was low. Frodo looked up at the sky. Suddenly he felt where a shadow passed over the high stars. As if for a moment they faded and then flashed out again. He shivered. "Did you see anything pass over?" he whispered to Gandalf, who was just ahead. "No, but I felt it. Whatever it was," he answered. "It may be nothing, only a wisp of thin cloud." "It was moving fast then," muttered Aragorn, "and not with wind." Nothing further happened that night. The next morning dawned even brighter than before, but the air was chill again. Already the wind was turning back towards the east. For 2 more nights they marched on, climbing steadily but ever more slowly as the road wound up in the hills and the mountains towered up, nearer and nearer. On the 3rd morning Caradhras rose before them, a mighty peak tipped with snow like sliver, but with sheer naked sides, dull red as if stained with blood. There was a black look in the sky, and the sun was waning. The wind had gone now round northeast. Gandalf snuffed the air and looked back. Winter deepens behind us, and he said quietly to Aragorn, "The heights away north are wider than they were. Snow is lying far down their shoulders. Tonight we shall be on our way high up towards the Redhorn Gate. We may have been seen by watchers on that narrow path, and waylaid by some evil. But the weather may prove a more deadly enemy than any. What do you think of your course now, Aragorn?" Frodo overheard these words and understood that Gandalf and Aragorn were continuing some debate that had begun long before. He listened anxiously. Frodo overheard these words and understood that Gandalf and Aragorn, I think no good of our course from beginning to end, as you know well, Gandalf answered Aragorn. And perils known and unknown will grow as we go on, but we must go on, and it is no good of our delaying the passage of the mountains. Further south there are no passes till one comes up of the Gap of Rohan. I do not trust that way, since the news of Saruman, who knows which side now the Marshal of the Horse Lord serve. Who knows indeed, said Gandalf, but there is another way, and not by the pass of Cederhus, the dark and secret way that we have spoken of. But let us not speak of it again, not yet. Say nothing to the others, I beg, not until it is plain that there is no other way. We must decide before we go, answered Gandalf. Then let us weigh the matter in our hands, while the others rest and sleep, said Aragorn. In the late afternoon, while the others were finishing their breakfast, Gandalf and Aragorn went aside together and stood looking at Cederhus. Its sides were now dark and sullen, and its head was in great cloud. Frodo watched them, wondering which way the debate would go. When they returned to the company, Gandalf spoke, and then he knew that it had been decided to face the weather and the high pass. He was relieved. He could not guess what was the other dark and secret way, but the very mention of it had seemed to fill Aragorn with dismay, and Frodo was glad that it had been abandoned. From signs that we have been seen lately, said Gandalf, I fear that the Red Horn Gate may be watched, and also I have doubts of the weather Red Horn Gate that is coming up behind. Snow may come. We must go with all the speed we can. Even so, it will take us much more than 2 marches before we reach the top of the pass. Dark will come early this evening. We must leave as soon as you can get ready. I will add a sort of advice, if I may, said Boromir. I was born under the shadow of the White Mountains and know something of journeys of the high place. We shall meet bitter cold, if no worse, before we come down to the other side. If we do not help us to keep, it will not help us to keep so secret that we are frozen to death. When we leave here, where we are still a few trees and bushes, each of us should carry a faggot of wood, as large as he can bear. And Bill could take a bit more, couldn't you, lad? Said Sam. The pony looked at him mournfully. Very well, said Gandalf, but we must not use the wood, not unless it is a choice between fire and death. The company set out again, and with good speed at first, but soon their way became steep and difficult. The twisting and climbing road had in many places almost disappeared, and was blocked with many fallen stones. The night grew steadily dark under the great clouds. A bitter wind swirled among the rocks. By midnight they had climbed to the knees of the great mountains. The narrow path now wound under a sheer wall of cliffs to the left, which the grim flanks of Cederhus towered up invisible of the gloom. On the right was gulf of darkness, where the land fell steadily into a deep ravine. Laboriously they climbed a sharp slope and halted for a moment at the top. Frodo felt a soft touch on his face. He put out his arm and saw the dim white flakes of snow settling out on his sleeve. They went on, and before long the snow was falling fast, filling all the air and swirling into Frodo's eyes. The dark, bent shapes of Gandalf and Aragorn, only a pace or two ahead, could hardly be seen. I don't like this at all, painted Sam, just behind. Snow's all right on the fine morning, but I like to be in bed while it's falling. I wish this lot would go off to Hobbiton. Folk might welcome it here. Except off to the high north of the Farthing, a heavy fall was rare in the Shire, and was regarded as a pleasant event in the chance for fun. No living hobbit, save Bilbo, could remember the fell winter of 1311, when white wolves invaded the Shire over the frozen Brandywine. Gandalf halted. Snow was thick on his hood and shoulders. It was already ankle-deep about his boots. This is what I feared, he said. What do you say now, Aragorn? That I feared it too, Aragorn answered, but less than the other things. I knew the risk of snow, though it seldom falls heavily so far south, save high up in the mountains, but we were not high yet. We are still far down, where the paths are usually open all the winter. I wonder if this is a contrivance of the enemy, said Boromir. That they say in the land that he can govern the storms of the mountains of shadow that stand upon the borders of Mordor. He has strange powers and many allies. His arm has grown long indeed, said Gimli. If he can only draw snow down from the north to trouble us from 300 leagues away. His arm has grown long, said Gandalf. Damn. That's deep, bro. Yeah, that was 30 minutes. Yeah, that was 30 minutes of reading every single day for the rest of my life. I'm loving this book so freaking much. Favorite fantasy book, definitely hands down. The journey with Frodo and the team through the land to protect this ring and do something with it. It's fascinating. I love it. I'm also playing Crimson Desert, which is just great fantasy. Let's go. Yeah, that was day 67 of reading every single day for the rest of my life for 30 minutes. And that was the timer. See y'all day 68. Let's go.